everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm sorry for the wait. We'll just get started and start on the introductions of the panelists who are here so far, and then Suzanne will hopefully join us soon. So my name is Liz Cook, and I'm with the Career Center, which is just upstairs at 103. No, we're in 103. It's at 202 McEleney. And this panel is co-hosted by the Center for Student Success with LA and PS. So thank you very much for co-hosting with us. And this event is also part of a series that includes the Industry Insights panels. So Career Conversations and Industry Insights are both very generously sponsored by the Alumni Relations Office, so we thank them very much for their support. For information on upcoming events, we have booklets at the back, so take those and on your way and find out more about our career services. And we have more exciting panels like this one coming up. So we've got careers in community health and social services coming up, project management and consulting, as well as careers in higher education. So please join us for those too. Just a few reminders before we begin. If you've got a loud cell phone ring, you might want to turn it down or on to vibrate. If you haven't already done so, there's a registration sheet at the back, so just make sure that you sign that before you leave. And if you are interested in learning about any of the other many services that the Career Center offers, then just come and talk to me and I'd be happy to tell you about those. And like I mentioned, there are booklets in the back. So the purpose of this panel is to provide inspiration. So we hope that in hearing career stories of alumni, you'll be inspired in your own career journeys. Another purpose is for insight and advice, so you get to learn about what it's really like to work in these areas and get some ideas for how you might get your own career started. And it's also an opportunity to connect and network with some professionals working in a field of interest. So after the initial question and answer period, we'll have a chance to mix and mingle with the panelists. So like I mentioned, we'll have the first hour will be a Q&A. So the first hour will be discussion. So if you've got questions, come in, welcome. Thank you, that's okay. If you've got questions, keep them in mind and remember them and ask them. We look forward to hearing them and answering them. And then you'll have the opportunity to mingle, and we'll end today's panel promptly at 4 p.m. Thank you for coming. Sorry. Okay. All right. So I'll begin by introducing the panelists. So right next to me on my right, I have Suzanne Carte, who's with the Art Gallery of York University, the AGYU. And to her right, we have Helmut Klassen, and Heather Phillips, and James McEleney. So thank you all very much for coming. And just to get the discussion started, I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourself and briefly tell us about your current role. So why don't we start with James and work our way this way.
I'm a musician. I play upright bass. I studied actually here at York. And my role in the various companies I work for would basically, I'm just a freelance bass player. So it's kind of a defined role within that, but what I do is sort of nebulous and sort of just a freelancer. So I work with a few groups. In particular, there's a bluegrass group called the Unseen Strangers, and another called the Andrew Collins Trio, and a jazz group called the Sondheim Jazz Project. And so basically, I play bass and use my musical expertise to do a job, I guess.
I'm an entrepreneur, I guess a York graduate, so I opened a shop with a fellow York graduate called ARTiculations, and it's in the Junction. It's a 3-part business. We are an art supply store, we have a gallery space where we host exhibitions, and we have a workshop space where we teach art classes to our surrounding community. And I do various roles within the shop, as there are just 2 of us right now.
Hi, involved with a number of things. I started off life as an architect, and so I still do work in architectural mostly planning and programming for museums, galleries, and libraries. So that's kind of professional work. But I've also done a PhD. I'm a graduate from the Communication and Culture program here at York. And so I've been involved also with kind of part of a large team that put on a site-specific art exhibition at Markham Museum last October, doing research as well as many different roles within the team to put that together. And I also now have taught courses, basically, a couple of courses a year in communication and now in environmental studies.
And as the assistant curator at the Art Gallery, York University, my main role is that of exhibition coordination. So I manage the gallery, the incoming artists, as well as do public programs, and then curate my own exhibitions as well. So through that, it's a very creative job as well through the coordination of the exhibitions, because you need to be able to coordinate many suppliers and other needs that the artists might have throughout, and also as an educator. So working with the content brought forward through the exhibition to highlight other academic resources that I can bring to the exhibition format, as well as work with the publishing stream that we have at AGYU. And I also do independent curatorial projects as well, so I can work within smaller institutions and be able to do more experimental, smaller scale projects.
Okay, great. Thank you all for sharing that. And I'm going to ask you all to also share just a brief overview of your career story. So how you first became interested in what you're doing now, where you started your career, including your educational background, and how you ended up where you are today. Let's start with James.
Oh boy. Well, I suppose, like most people, being interested in music started pretty early. I was, I guess, maybe a preteen or so. Took lessons privately, and then ended up at York University for some formal training. And then the career path is really just work a regular job, or a real job, enough to pay rent, and practice and hang around other musicians, and basically real sort of grassroots networking. So meet the people you who are doing the things that you like to do, or that you would like to be doing, and hang out with them, which is basically all I did. I went to jams, went to lots of informal gigs that didn't really pay, but to hang out with the types of people that you would like. And then it leads one thing to the next. You meet some people. For example, how I got into the Andrew Collins trio was I was recording with another band. He was doing the session, and you end up meeting someone that way, and then he was like, oh, this guy sounds good, let's get him to do that. So lots of really small details like that, little connections like that is where I am, how I got to where I am now. Where I am now, I don't really know, though.
Okay, that's good.
So I went to York for I didn't say this, but the Fine Arts, the Visual Arts program, and I focused mainly in the sculpture and photography program. So while I was here, I made a lot of great friends, and friends that stuck with me, and a great peer network that I stayed with. One of those people was Mickey Rubin, and we were both woodshop monitors while we studied here. And then from that position, we were both selected to work with Nell Tenhoff, who's another professor in the program. She needed studio assistants, so we moved from that position to helping her with her work. And the nature of that studio assistant position was that the two of us were working together alone on a project that was kind of a little bit out of our scope. We didn't know what we were doing when we started, but we figured it out along the way. And that turned into a collaborative role once we finished school. So we were no longer her assistants, but we stayed on the project and continued working on the project was called Lo-Fi, and then we moved with her to another project. So she's a digital artist, and we ended up building the sculptural work for her. So that was a 5-year span of time where Mickey and I learned how to work together, problem solve, and build things together. And then at the same time, I did an internship at the AGYU, actually. So I graduated from York, and then I came back and I did a short stint there just when Suzanne was starting. And that was a great opportunity for me to work in an art gallery in an art institution, and to kind of explore the curatorial aspects that always interest me in my own practice. And so they kind of informed each other. Left school, Mickey and I ended up finding a studio down in the Junction that we shared, tried to make work, had to pay rent, had to decide to put some things on hold so that we could pay said rent and pay back school bills. So that happened for a little while, and I think I was just finishing up doing a video program at the AGYU, and I had to pay my rent the next month, and I'd kind of like run dry. And I took a job at a Benjamin Moore paint store in the neighborhood, because I thought I applied to a lot of different jobs in my field with nothing coming back, which there's a lot of people looking for those same types of jobs. And I decided that if I couldn't get a job in my field, then I was going to get a job that was a 30-second walk from my studio, so that I didn't have to commute. I could just go there. And a good piece of advice that was given to me was from Michael Miranda, who works at the AGYU, and he was very supportive. He's like, that's great. You need to pay your rent. You need to do what you need to do, but don't get stuck, because it was like a full 9-to-5 job. I had an income for the first time in a long time, and that felt really great. But that stuck with me, and I kind of put it in the back of my mind that I was happy to have that security and to start paying back my loans. But I had to put a time limit on the time that I spent there to keep focused into what was important. So while I was doing that, sorry, this is longer. This is not short. But the job with Nell Tenhoff ran out. The grant money finished. We completed the project. It went to exhibition. And Mickey and I started kind of scheming as to what we wanted to do next. So we were both doing these jobs that we needed to pay the rent. I was still applying for any job that came up on Work and Culture. Nothing was really biting. And then by working at the paint store in the neighborhood, I started to understand that there was a fairly large artistic community there, and there was a need for there was a desire and a need for some type of creative space, and there was a ton of artists that would come into a house paint store for art supplies. So we, to make this shorter, we lived in the same building, and I knocked on his door one day after work, and I was like, how do you feel about opening an art supply store where we can have a gallery and we'll have a studio space? And he's a kind of a quiet individual, and he just kind of took a pause, and he's like, yeah, okay. So that was it, and we Googled how to start your own business, which seemed like a great place to start, and we looked up what kind of opportunities were out there for young entrepreneurs, and the answer is a lot. There's a lot of support out there if you have an idea and you want to see it grow. So that was, I guess, January 2011, and we opened the doors of ARTiculations December 2011. So we took that span of time to learn how to build a business plan. Both of us just had undergraduate degrees in fine arts. We did not have a business background, but my experience at the paint store informed the small business aspect that I needed, and Mickey's experience in his jobs also helped us with like the hands-on stuff. And we found a spot. We did the homework. We were approved for grants into mentorship through the CYBF, the Canadian Youth Business Foundation, and that provided the framework for the store. So now I have a shop. We've been open for 2 years, which is really awesome. Last week, BlogTO did a little post about best art supply shops in the city. they posted all of them because there's not that many, but we were number 4 on the list, which felt really great. And our job, I guess now we're continuing to connect with our community. We keep meeting really great artists through the gallery space, and the workshop programming continues to grow. The retail side of things has really developed for us. We focus more on hard-to-find art supplies and high-quality art supplies, and that's, in a weird way, kept us connected with the arts community at large, because practicing professional artists have learned to come to us when they are in search of something that's hard to find. And that's where I am.
Thank you. It was
yeah, okay.
how you became interested in this field, where you started in your career, so including your educational
Right.
background, and how you ended up where you are today.
Okay, when I finished high school, I went into a professional degree in architecture a while ago, which was one of the older kind of 5-year bachelor degrees. Now they're called master's degrees. But it was a professional degree, and I worked for quite a while as in profession, learning what architects do. But I was always felt pinned down or too narrowly framed by the way the profession worked. And so I was always interested in other things, the intellectual side of the work, different dimensions of what it means to build something or to make something physically in architecture. And so I actually went and did a master's degree in architectural history and theory in Montreal, and I was teaching a little bit in history and theory, still working professionally to keep myself alive, because that's, I think, an important thing, is to have some kind of base to be able to, when things aren't going well, that you can go back to when you need to be able to support yourself, because it can get anxiety. It can produce a lot of anxiety trying to move on. And I've been doing this for a long time now, and it doesn't really stop. Like when you said you don't know quite where you are now, I would say the same thing. But I'll get to that in a minute. So after I think I taught for 2 years in Turkey, and then came back to Canada during a recession, and there wasn't much going on. And so I was always interested in doing a doctorate, and I chose to do a doctorate outside of architecture here at York in communication and culture. And I chose that program because there was just a lot of interesting people in this program who were both professors and students that came from a wide variety of different disciplines, and that kind of really intrigued me, so that I found people who I could speak to without having to totally transform myself into a communications expert. And there was a lot of interest in, especially here at York, in terms of urban issues, history and sociology of the city, as well as in the fine arts. I spent some time TAing in fine arts as well. So I've touched a lot of different things that way. And while doing the doctorate, which took almost 9.5 years, because I was a mature student with a family and life things and working almost full time. At the same time, let's say the one thing that got me in the connection was that each one of the things I'm telling you, each one of them has a slight connection to the next one. So it's kind of like you meet someone and it just kind of happens in some ways. It's not necessarily like a plan of how I got here. So I had moved to Toronto and eventually got a job working in a small firm doing museum planning. And the architect I worked for used to work for the National Museums of Canada when they built the National Gallery and the Museum of Civilization in Ottawa. So this was a kind of a lucky connection, because I had no background in museums particularly, or galleries, but I was able to work in a very small space that allowed me to get involved in kind of everything about this work, and over time learning this work and getting to work on all sorts of great institutions, big and small, across the country. Like, we worked on the programming for the National War Museum in Ottawa. And I should just tell you a little bit about what that might mean. It's like a program. What does that mean? Part of it is like just a lot of the technical things about what a museum has, how much space is required for a classroom and an office, but for a museum, there's also things that they collect. And so, like, how much room do you need for a couple of World War I tanks and a jet airplane, and what kind of space does that require, and would you like to put that together? So there's a whole there's a sort of a physical thing about it, which is based on the things that are collected. And we've worked with, like, the War Museum. I've worked with a lot of history museums, the Air and Space Museum here in Toronto, the Museum of Anthropology in Vancouver, which has the First Nations collections. But in each one of these institutions, there's also a need for a kind of an intellectual program. That it's not just a statement of neutral, objective things, but they have to be interpreted in a certain way, and interpreted from ideas from people who know things about them, like curators, and interpreting those into the language of architecture and design. So that's really where I was interested in. And so doing the doctorate in this context really helps me to go back now to discuss things with people who are interested in, natural science specimens, or doing, research for the Royal Alberta Museum. They collect bison bones, like they cull bison every year, and have a insect lab where the insects eat all the flesh off the bones. And so they can keep the bones, and they use those for a yearly study to study the evolution, essentially, of bison in the present context. So, like, you get to see a lot of different things and a lot of interesting things this way. So that's really where my interest came in. And so that museum aspect of my experience, plus my interest in history and theory and all these things that I did my PhD on, led to me being connected to the Landslide project, which was a SSHRC-sponsored creative research project with Janine Marchessault here. She's a professor in film, and now she's the director of Sensorium, the digital research lab. But she had done a number of these site-specific art installations, and so I was involved with the one in Markham Museum, which dealt with sort of suburban reality, what would development in the future be. The fact that it was done at the museum, that was formerly a kind of a pioneer heritage place where they'd have where they'd find a building, bring a log cabin, and put it on the site to kind of make it look like it's almost like a little carnival environment, but to take that seriously within, theoretically, historically, and then in terms of engaging artists who engage the space. Because it was a museum, that my museum experience came back and fit right into that research program. And so I'm still kind of working partly to see what I could cull out of that experience. I'm working, like at the moment, I'm working on a Goderich, sort of Huron County History Museum, looking at all their collections and to make a plan for what they will do for the next 20 years. I've worked on a firefighting museum, which is a bunch of retired firefighters who collect fire trucks, and they want to make a museum in Welland in a historical building. And so it's to put all that information together in a way that it becomes a project. So there's the historical information, there's the kind of social history of these firefighters, the heritage architecture of this fire hall, technical requirements, technical and it's not like for museums and galleries. There's a whole new realm in museums about the transformation of how museums and galleries engage the public, putting that all together, synthesizing that information so that it becomes a project. So that's kind of what I'm where I am. And I guess the last thing I wanted to mention is that when I graduated from my PhD a couple of years ago, I came to the Career Center because I didn't have anything to do. There was not much going on, it seemed. And which was a bit of a lull, because within 3 months I had like 3 things to do. But in that interim, I thought, oh, what am I going to do? I'm not young anymore, like most people who graduate, and you get anxious. And I spoke to Carolyn, and Carolyn said, you're never going to get a job where you have to apply for something. You have to make your own job. Just because you've done too many things, it's too diverse, you have so many different kinds of experiences that you don't really fit into a category where you can just, fit the form and you'll get a job. And that's stuck with me. And in that sense, that's why I think I'm still in progress, because where I am right now is like not a fixed state, because I have to be looking where that will take me afterwards. So.
Yeah, that's a great jumping off point, because I think that is true. A lot of the jobs that I've had, I've made myself as well. But they've been placed within institutions, but I've just been gregarious enough to go in and tell them that they need me. And so, but they really don't. But so I was really lucky in the sense that my interest and love of galleries and museums started at a really young age. And for me, it was the only thing I wanted to do. And so, but I did a studio degree at the University of Windsor with a BFA. And at that point, there was no career advice. There was no practical, there was no experiential learning or anything like that, where I was coming out and knew how to paint and draw, but had no idea what kind of application that could actually provide for me. And the idea of being a professional practicing artist at a young age and coming out is the same thing. You need to pay your bills, and what's going to happen from there. So for me, I felt like the easiest thing for me to slide into was the education department at galleries. So I did a lot of different submissions into galleries, wound up at the Art Gallery Hamilton working in the education department. That meant that I was working with predominantly youth-driven initiatives, and working in their studio doing not only tours of the exhibitions, but pairing them with hands-on technique-based painting, drawing, sculpture, that kind of thing. So I wound up doing that for a number of years, and then freelance as well at other organizations doing education programs. But then I found it really difficult to get out of education programs, because you were pigeonholed in a way in which, when people were looking at your resume when you were applying for other positions, would be like, oh, well, you do education. And education in a lot of galleries and museums is a very department that doesn't speak to curatorial, developmental advancement. So yeah, it is hard once you get within that niche of the education department. So I went back to school, and it was the first year of the cultural management and arts administration at Humber College. I'm sure that it's changed now, but then, yeah, being the guinea pig year was very, very strange. And I when I was working at the Art Gallery Hamilton, was also volunteered a lot. Was on the board at Hamilton Artists Inc., their artist-run center. So I was already starting to learn more about administrative roles, and so was able to kind of solidify that with a certificate. But then I walked into the Power Plant Contemporary Art Gallery, and that's when I realized that what I really wanted to do was curatorial, because it was the perfect combination of my skills in regards to administration, but creative problem solving, as well as knowing that I no longer wanted to focus on art production as an artist, but wanted to champion other artists instead, that I saw extreme potential in, and or was very excited about their work and knew that other people would be excited about their work and wanting to position it within the institution. But at that point, there was no, or at least it was just starting, but there's lots of curatorial programs right now in a university setting. And but that was never an option. The cult of the curator wasn't really built when I was doing my undergrad. So I was able to just do it by working alongside some of the country's best curators. And I walked into the power plant, and through being at Humber College, when you've got student tacked on to the end of your name, sometimes it's a lot easier to walk in and say, well, I'm going to do this. And yes, it is free labor for them, but it's not always free, because the time and energy that a lot of the mentors and managers spend with volunteers is time consuming. And so I went in and wrote my own grant. I said I would love to work here, but I can't work for free. And there was, through Canadian Heritage at that time, it was an under 30, 2 or 3 month work placement. And so I worked with them for 3 months, and at the time the curator of the power plant was Philip Monk, and he hired me into the position of a curatorial assistant, and I worked for 4 months there, and then I worked for 5, and then 6, and then 7. It just, I kept getting these monthly renewals. And so I worked there for a number of years. I unfortunately only got to work with Philip for 2 weeks. He hired me and then left. And I wondered if I was a curse upon the institution that he had brought down. But as it turned out, no, because over a decade later, he rehired me. So I moved from the power plant after my contract was done. I was with them for a number of years. And then was interested in the politics of public art galleries. So I moved into an advocacy role working with the Ontario Association of Art Galleries, and did professional development and public programs for the association. So was really able to lobby the government, was able to work behind the scenes as another type of champion instead of for individual artists, for the system and the network of galleries and museums in the province. And after that, I got really, really hungry to be back in the institution again, back in the gallery. So from then, and there are different waves of trends that happen within any discipline. But at that time, the trend was in public programming in this term called outreach. So all of these galleries were starting to apply for funding for outreach outreach coordinators. And because I was at the forefront of knowing what the councils were going to be asking the galleries to produce, I knew that outreach was going to be the new directive. So started to talk to galleries and tell them that they needed to have an outreach program coordinator. And I ended up sharing a job between 2, Blackwood Gallery at the University of Toronto Mississauga campus and at the Art Gallery of Mississauga. And it was a difficult position because it's a garbage can kind of term where outreach means a lot of things to a lot of different people. It means audience development. It means marketing strategies, creative marketing strategies, and being able to bring people in. But I saw it as a curatorial premise, and as being able to see public programming on the equal playing field as the exhibition, and so that it had the same purchase as an exhibition does, as validating artists' work. And so worked for that, and then that's when I saw that there was a position opening up at the Art Gallery, York University, with Philip Monk at the helm, and jumped at the chance, and he rehired me. So when I came into the job, same thing as we were talking about with making these jobs your own. During the interview process, I really stressed what I had to offer through all of the various jobs I had had beforehand, and I stressed that I wasn't going to come in and just manage exhibitions and manage staff, but instead that I would make the institution recognizable on campus, and that I would work for student engagement, and that I came in saying that this is what I'm going to do for you, and it worked. So, and I've been trying to up to this point. but a couple of years ago, I took a year off. And sometimes, you know, as you'll find out too, as all the panelists can say, is that burnout happens a lot when you're either working for yourself, you're overworked, underpaid, and working within charitable organizations, volunteering at various other organizations, and working with artists 24/7, and your social life becomes your work life, becomes your social life, becomes your work life, and it's just all intertwined in this ball. And so yeah, I guess it was a bit of burnout, and because I never did my master's degree, which if I was to ever change jobs now, I guess I have all of the practical experience to be a curator in a mid to large scale institution. I don't have the credentials. So I went back to school and did a year in New York at the Sotheby's Institute of Art I did my master's in in contemporary art history. So, which a year master's, I don't know if I can recommend it. It was, it was intense. I remember someone had said to me beforehand how much work it was. It was like, work? I worked at a gallery for all my life. I know what work is, but and it wasn't the work. It was just that you find your footing after a year, and then it's like, then it gets taken away from you. I was having so much fun going to galleries every day and talking to gallery staff and inserting myself in that world.
Thank you all for sharing your stories. I'm hearing a lot of. It sounds like work in arts and culture can be precarious, and it takes a lot of agility and creativity to make your own way. So thanks for sharing. I'd like to open up the floor for questions. So if you do have a question, it would be great if you could stand up and just let us know if you're addressing one or all of the panelists. And try and keep your questions broad enough that they'd be applicable to everyone. And keep in mind that there will be a chance afterwards to mix and mingle. So if you have a question that's very specific to you, then you can ask that a little bit later on.
Yeah, I missed the first couple of introductions, but I heard both of you. I'm in a similar situation. Been artist all my life, and came back and did my master's degree in my chosen field of art. And I'm waiting for that one thing that's going to start a flow of events. And you mentioned,
Helmut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned a string of gigs. Was there one, and you talked to Caroline, was there one event that sort of tripped it all, or was it something in yourself, or what created that flow? And for you too, after master's experience, what was it? Was there one event that happened, or was it a change in how you looked at things? That's my question.
I don't know if there was just one event, because a lot of as I said, it's more about interconnections between something you've done before and something that happens again, and something comes back, and you meet somebody new, or something, you try something else, and then you bring it back, and then it adjusts how you relate to what you've done before. I think the thing that I think it was about a change of attitude. I mean, because obviously I did my history and theory of architecture degree when I was close to 30, and my PhD I started like almost at 40. And so that's not a normal approach to an education or an academic career, even though I enjoy the academic work and I enjoy teaching. But and there was always this kind of like, well, maybe it'll turn out that you'll just land somewhere and it'll all be okay afterwards. And I think the one thing was, again, speaking to Carolyn, because after graduating and having nothing to do, and then it just kind of hit me, and it said, oh, you just have to kind of trust yourself, or at least accept yourself, because what you're saying is, if you are always looking for validation, like I want to get this kind of job, and if I'm applying and never getting the job, or never getting an interview, or there's no jobs out there, which is largely the case these days, you're not going to feel very good about life. Worse than usual, but you're looking for validation. Like, you're not just dealing with your daily problems or your own personal problems, but it's kind of like the world is telling you you suck. If you take that attitude, and I think what turned it around was just saying, oh, okay, accept what you have. You have a lot of stuff. You have a lot of abilities, a lot of experience, and somehow that has to be rewoven in a certain way. And I think that was what really made the difference about being able to move on and to be generally positive, was that you accept that what you have and what you have done. And what happened, of course, is that it just, like, I don't know, within about 2 months after that I spoke to you, all of a sudden I had this postdoctoral work, which I said, of course I'll do it, but I can't live off of that completely. And then some professional work, because the profession had been very bad for many years, came along almost at the same time. And I had a teaching job that was going to, like, I could have done all of that all at once, because they were all there, and I was going, well, which one do I choose, right? And it just, that's just kind of either luck or circumstance, but even then you have to make the choices, right? So, because usually one of the things is that those circumstances happen, but it's usually people who are under stress who are calling you at that time. So, or at least that's what I found. I actually turned down a teaching sessional appointment at the University of Toronto, which would have actually been very good for an academic career for me, but it was like a week before the term started. And they were very desperate to have someone, and it was like you'd have to develop a whole course in like 10 days. And it was like a first-year course, so there was 300 or 400 students, and so it was just not the right situation, even though you wonder, oh, what if I would have chosen that rather than this, and what would have happened? But, I don't know. It's just I think the most important thing is the acceptance of where you are, what you've done, and the idea that will lead somewhere.
I kind of wanted to add on to that, too. Although I haven't done a master's, I had a similar experience when we started to work on building this idea of the store. And I remember there was a point where I had said, okay, I'm done working at my real job. And I was like, I think I'm finished. And I put it out there that that's not what I wanted to do anymore. And I was still applying. So while we were opening the store, I was still applying for anything that came up that made sense for me. And I didn't get any calls back. And as soon as I was working on the store, I got like 3 or 4 calls back for interviews, and I ended up going, I still have a part-time job at the AGYU for a gallery school technician, which was a job that I don't understand how and why they called me at that time. And when I went for the interview, they clearly had a copy of my resume, because they keep them on file. So they had a resume from like 4 years ago sitting in front of them, and they were interviewing me with that, but somehow that happened. So it was putting that energy out and deciding that that's not what I wanted, and I wanted to carve something out for myself, and also appreciating that although you're going to have jobs that maybe aren't in your field, the paint store isn't. When I first applied there, I called to check in, and they said that they'd gone with somebody who was more qualified, and I was just like, what am I going to do? But I ended up getting that, and that experience, all of those experiences, I wanted to reiterate that everything that I had done up to that point completely informed where I am now, and like the connections that are still being made. Like, it's really important that you pay attention to that stuff and not to be too hard on yourself when you feel like you're wasting your time or you're not doing what you really love. Like, to just kind of appreciate and respect where you are, and to just keep moving forward and keeping focus onto what is important to you and what you want in your life. For me, that was art. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in visual arts while I'm graduating, and I'm just wondering, like, I don't really know what kind of jobs are out there, and I'm not sure where to look. So I was wondering if you had any advice on that.
Yeah, there's a couple of places I would suggest. The Ontario Association of Art Galleries has a really good job line. Work in culture, but I also think that hitting the pavement and just continuing to go to events but first of all, highlight what your strengths are and what it is that you're actually interested in doing. Do you want to work in a gallery? Do you want to run your own business? And but as far as like what positions are available, when I did my undergrad, Ian Baxter, he's a Canadian artist, and Ian was one of my professors, and he gave us this list that was like this thick. And he said, with your art degree, these are all the jobs that you can have. And artist was not on the list. And I remember thinking, oh, you jerk. I want to be an artist. But in saying that, it was like the creative power that you hold and being able to problem solve and to work with your hands. And it's like there's a whole plethora of jobs at your disposal. And positions. I know that doesn't help you, but if you are interested in working in a public art gallery, an artist-run center, or any form of art center, we can talk afterwards about positions that are coming available.
And James, is there anything you'd like to add about music? We've talked about visual arts.
I don't really know specifically.
What types of jobs are out there? If you're
What types of jobs? Gigs. My path hasn't necessarily been the person to go out and get the gigs. I think of myself as sort of a subcontractor, or, I'm a plumber, but I play the bass. So not specifically to bass playing, but music, teaching privately is the most obvious one, which I'm sure there's probably some capacity that is in the art world. But other than that, you kind of just sort of have to go out and, I suppose, bang on doors to get gigs. Or my theory was always to just hang around where the musicians or the creative people that I was interested in were hanging out, and sort of be around and be good. Like, I don't know, that's not a particularly helpful comment. That just means practice, do what you do. But if you practice a lot but nobody knows who you are, if you're a really great artist but nobody knows who you are, or you have those skills, it really doesn't matter. So the most important thing for me having a career in music or building a career in music is really being around and being friendly and being good. You could lump friendly into being good.
It's a skill, a definite skill that you need. Like, as all of us have talked about the networking and, the old adage of, like, it's not what you know, but who you know. Half of that is true. And you do need to, if you are interested in a certain profession, seek out the people that are already working within that field, and talk to them and meet with them and ask for their time. Hopefully they're more than generous with it and with their contacts as well. But the more you do, and I feel like that with doing my master's, it gave me confidence, and it gave me a different level of confidence that potentially I didn't have before. And then of course doing it outside of the city, every Toronto artist complains that you're no one until you do it somewhere else first. And so that, I think that going away and doing my master's and then coming back made me a little sexier. And so then people would see me at openings and be like, what are you working on? And so I would make it up on the spot. I'm working on it's a great project that you should take. It's about zombies. And that's exactly how that happened. And then, so.
I wanted to say, too, so James and I are married, so I have a little bit of insight as to how things are going with him as a musician. But it's not just about hanging out, but it's also about participating and taking part in a lot of things. And there's not just gigs, but there's like jams around the city and being, I don't know, good at starting up conversation and putting yourself out there. Like, if you go to those things and you don't really talk to everybody or anybody, just make it a goal that to go out to openings, to go out to the places and be around the people that you want to be around, and put yourself out there a little bit. Like, it's always awkward at first, and when you think about the word networking, it kind of seems a little bit like there's a barrier there. But it's just talking with people, just like make new friends.
Yeah. Keep in mind, when I say networking, it almost always involves at least one of two substances, caffeine or alcohol.
Yeah. But then, in with that too, making yourself open and available, which also makes you vulnerable at certain times too. Where I recently had, about 10 years ago, I was volunteering for an event at the Canadian Art Auction, and I was cleaning plates off of a table, and I remember sitting in the back with this secondhand piece of salmon, thinking, oh, this sucks. And I'm never going to be sitting at the table. I'm always going to be eating in the kitchen. And then also, but I put myself out there, and I made myself vulnerable, and I was able to see a different level of the art world that I wanted to work within, and was able to do that. And this year I was invited to curate it. So
That's really
so
cool.
last night I had my first meeting with the editor of Canadian Art, and we sat down and did our picks for the auction. And I just had that moment where I just remembered that girl 10 years ago eating salmon in the kitchen. And then, so anyways.
Diane, James, I just wanted to know, do you apply to Canada Council for any of your jazz festival?
I personally have not, because I'm very bad that way, because I'm again in the subcontractor mode of my life. But I'm involved in many groups that have the Unseen Strangers, which is a bluegrass group that I play with a lot, has received numerous grants for recording. There's 2 records that were basically put out by largely in part by funding from Ontario, Toronto, and Canada Council. Yes, just most artists who are at the point where they're releasing records or touring that I've worked with in one way or another are involved with the arts councils. So that would be, actually an important part that I'm actually preparing myself to investigate. By meaning I'm preparing a recording, and then with that I'll be able to move forward with that in my own personal projects. But just about any project that is that I'm involved with that is significant is pretty heavily involved with the arts councils on every level, municipal, provincial, and federal.
Also, I have 2 questions. The first one is about networking. I hope I can get some suggestion from all of you. And another question is for Heather, because I have a similar situation, but in a different way. Because I don't have art degree, but I'm first year of business degrees here, and I'm graduating this year. And I want to get into the industry of culture and fashion. Basically, it's combined of beauty and healthy living style. And York has multicultural week, so I'm the event host for my club, the York Chinese Club, for this year and last year. We threw out the parade at the fashion show on campus, and which works good. But if I want to create my own brand in the future, I need to get to know the knowledge in the art, which I don't have. I only have how to do the marketing, how to do a good business, but I'm lacking of the knowledge in the art industry or in the culture. So I want to know, how could I make up that?
Okay.
The question was networking tips from each of the panelists, and for Heather specifically, have you gained knowledge of the art industry?
Yes, because the networking is, I know how to get a lot of networking from business area, but for the art area, I have no idea.
Well, that's what we want. We want the business
Yeah.
contact. So we can share.
Well, I have one friend in jewelry design, one friend clothes design, and my friend also designed clothes for me, which I'm at my house. I'm not wearing today.
So it sounds like you already have some connections within the art, or the art, or is what type of art industry are you Like when you say art,
It's
what's
like I want to combine the modern fashion and also the Chinese cultural version clothes. So our clothes with like 4,000 to 5,000 year history.
oh wow.
I want to bring that back to life.
So I would say that the first thing, it sounds like when you said that you have a friend who's developing your fashions and jewelry, like that's who you spend your time with. Those are your contacts, and to just look to what interests you. One of the best things I took out of being at York was the networks and the peers and the friends that I made, and just staying in contact and staying focused together to make sure that we're always making work, which was important to me. But I would say we didn't have a business background, so everything that we learned from that standpoint was just from working our part-time, full-time jobs and internet research. But you just have to look towards where you see your brand or what you're trying to build going, and immerse yourself in that, and meet with people, and just see if you can find a network of people that kind of shares similar goals or are kind of thinking on the same wavelength as you, and just keep going, keep pushing, keep knocking on doors and asking questions. And in terms of the networking question in general, a great push yourself. Everybody's nervous. I am super nervous when I'm in a room of people and I'm trying to push myself to talk to others. And I'd stepped away from the art world for a while when I worked at the paint store, and I felt intimidated to kind of go back to openings, and like I didn't have something to offer, which I think a lot of people, like that insecurity is, lots of people have it, and I didn't know what I was going to talk about and if I was going to be interesting, but I pushed myself to go out and be present, and just like force yourself to do something that makes you a little uncomfortable, meet new people, and I don't know, that's the best advice I could give.
Actually, that's kind of the question I want to know, because I'm okay with public speaking. I host some event like with 1,000 people, so I'm okay with talking. But when I don't know where all the like the design arts people, where they get together, I don't know where they go. I don't know where to find them. And the second question is, even they're standing in front of me, I'm like talking a lot, and they're just smiling and what's going on.
So where are some places that you can, some specific places that you can go where you
and
can?
what topic I can talk with them, because sometimes they're so shy, I don't know what to bring up.
Okay.
Does you know about Now Magazine? Check out Now Magazine.
Yeah.
In the back with the list of events. That'd be a good way to start, I'd say.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Now
Good.
Magazine and the cultural listings in
Yeah.
Now Magazine. Does anyone else have something that you'd like to add?
I always find it helpful. I can't tell you a specific thing to talk to people about, but often not the thing you want from them. Like I used to have particular anxiety around really good musicians, drummers in particular. As a bass player, there's a special relationship there, and the best drummers, like I would try and talk about music and drumming in specific with them, which is the worst idea ever, or at least for me it was. So finding a common ground, like talking about something that doesn't have to do with music, is definitely a way to endear yourself a little more than, because if you come across like, hey, you're a really good drummer, your drumming's good, I'd like to drum with you, that, that can be a little direct, and sometimes, people go, oh, what, put their guard up a little bit. But if, I don't know, that may or may not work, but.
So you approach it like a genuine conversation.
I try to, yeah.
Rather than letting them know what.
I try to seem as cool as possible. Just hanging out. Oh, hey, you also happen to be here. How about the local sports team? Although local sports might not work with the artists.
I think we have
So
time for.
I was going to add one last. This is slightly different because I think where I started off in architecture and in professional activity, slightly different than what we're talking about the art world here, because What eventually occurred to me is you didn't want to hang around other architects because they would immediately interrogate you as to what you were doing, who did you work for, what were you going on, what was your contact, etc. And so there was that kind of a competitive action, and so after a while it was like, well, I'd rather speak to other people about it because this was really not productive because everybody was trying to, take your work for themselves. And so I think this may apply, I don't know if you can say that or not, but seeing a variety of people is probably important as well, just because, like, kind of similar to what you're saying about going up to the drummer or the musician and saying, well, I want to be like you. Well, he says, well, I'm like me, and I've got my position, and I'd like to keep it, right? So it's kind of like if you're not going to get everything indirectly or directly. So I think the indirect approach is also important.
We have time for one more question.
My question is kind of like his, but more like educating yourself. So if you're in school and your major is something not very art related, like writing or something, what would you like? Where would you suggest like you get like at least introductory knowledge on art, like especially if you're interested like outside school, or like in school, like what courses would you like encourage me to take? I wanted to gain like general knowledge.
Okay, so outside of school, where would be good places to learn about art? And then in school, what types of courses would be valuable? Who would like to?
Well, I'm not familiar too much. If they're the same courses, there are some really great survey courses with that, like within York University, at an entry level where you can get an intro to art. And outside of school, many or if not all of the art institutions in the have some kind of programming. There's usually lectures and talks. Most of those types of events are free, which is really great. So I would kind of take a look at the AGYU, look at, I don't know, the Power Plant does a really great talk series, like a Sunday talk series.
Yeah, actually that's excellent. Yeah, it's called Power Talk. Is it Power
I
Talk?
think
Sunday Scene.
Sunday Scene.
Where they invite people from the Toronto art community to just tour the exhibition, but it's through a very personal lens. But you get a chance to talk about the art that's on display and have a different way of seeing, but then you connect with a local artist as well. So yeah, every Sunday. It is excellent. And yeah, most galleries do have free public programming. We have free public programming. And yeah, most times it is about the work itself. And the great thing about art too is that visual art as well is that people come to it from all different disciplines, and that it's relevant to all different disciplines as well. Art doesn't speak to art all the time. It speaks to social and political action and engagement. So most times we're looking to have a conversation that's outside of the visual realm too. So talk about literature and writing. And,
Another hot tip. The Toronto Library often has free passes to get into different cultural institutions. So, yeah, they'll have different, like they usually have a set of passes, and you can book them to go to the AGYUs. And I don't know where else. I think the ROM, there's some passes for that as well. So take advantage of the free opportunities. There's a ton in the city if you look for them.
And there are lots of commercial galleries that are open and free all the time. Or, well, they're not open all the time, but yeah, that, like.
The best conversations I've had in galleries are usually with the security guards and the animateurs that are in this space, because they're seeing the work all the time. They're talking about it. They're having people ask them questions about it. So they're usually there to engage in conversation. So commercial galleries can sometimes be a little bit more prickly about the time that they want to spend with people. They just want to talk art and don't want to talk money. But yeah, but I think that most public art galleries, if you talk to anybody within that's hanging around, they're happy to do so.
There are tons of places that you can start learning.
Which they're in the listings at Now, on the back of the Now. So they're
That's true. The must-see shows.
Yeah.
Good place to start.
Yeah. Great. So that brings us to the end of our formal Q&A portion of today's panel. So our intention for this afternoon session was to provide you with the opportunity to hear about some different career paths, to learn from some very accomplished alumni and York community members, and to gain a little bit of insight on how you might get your own careers started. So I hope we found this information helpful. And please join me in thanking our panelists for taking time out of their busy schedules for being here. We really appreciate it. So let's give them a round of applause.